Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the heart of Genoa City. Today is a beautiful day to unravel the complex, emotional, and often heartbreaking dynamics of our favorite characters. We are thrilled to have you with us as we explore a storyline that will leave you absolutely breathless. Let us jump right into the latest, earth-shattering developments. The Newman family has always been defined by an impenetrable facade of absolute strength, a legacy of ruthlessness and invulnerability forged by Victor Newman himself. For decades, the members of this powerful dynasty have been taught that vulnerability is a fatal flaw, a weakness to be exploited by their endless array of enemies. No one has internalized this toxic lesson more profoundly than Victoria Newman. As the CEO of Newman Enterprises, Victoria has spent her entire adult life molding herself into the perfect heir, an iron lady capable of withstanding any corporate siege or family betrayal. However, the human body and the human spirit can only endure so much before the armor begins to crack. The sheer, crushing weight of her responsibilities, compounded by the terrifying decline of her mother's health, has finally pushed Victoria to the absolute brink of human endurance. The psychological pressure cooker she has been living inside is about to explode, revealing a devastating truth that will alter the Newman family forever. For weeks, Victoria has been fighting a silent, agonizing battle on multiple fronts. On the surface, she is the commanding executive, barking orders, managing global assets, and fiercely protecting the Newman empire from external threats and internal sabotage. But beneath the designer suits and the icy demeanor, Victoria has been crumbling. She has been experiencing terrifying physical symptoms, a profound, bone-deep fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure. Sudden bouts of breathlessness that leave her gasping in the privacy of her office, and a racing heart that feels as though it might shatter her ribs. Yet, driven by an overwhelming fear of being perceived as weak or incapable, especially in the eyes of her demanding father, she has actively chosen to ignore every single warning sign her body has given her. She has convinced herself that she simply does not have the time to be sick, not when her family needs her to be the unwavering pillar of strength. In my opinion, this is how Victoria is protecting herself from pain by transforming her body into an unfeeling machine. She mistakenly believes she can outrun the emotional devastation of potentially losing her mother. She has compartmentalized her terror regarding Nikki's failing health, locking it away in a dark corner of her mind and replacing it with a frantic, obsessive need to control everything else around her. If she can control the boardroom, if she can control the stock prices, if she can control the narrative, then perhaps she can somehow control the terrifying reality that her mother is slipping away. This psychological defense mechanism is a desperate attempt to stave off the agonizing grief that threatens to consume her, but it is a strategy that demands a catastrophic physical toll. Victoria's relentless dedication to her mother has only exacerbated her own hidden deterioration. She has spent countless sleepless nights sitting by Nikki's bedside, holding her hand, and trying to project a sense of absolute certainty and hope that she does not truly feel. She has skipped meals, ignored her own exhaustion, and poured every ounce of her remaining energy into being Nikki's fierce advocate. She has fought with doctors, demanded better treatments, and absorbed all of her mother's fears, leaving absolutely nothing for herself. The tragic irony is that in her desperate quest to save her mother's life, Victoria has been actively neglecting her own, pushing her physical limits far beyond the breaking point. She has become a martyr to the Newman standard of strength, sacrificing her own well-being on the altar of family duty. The inevitable breaking point arrives during a high-stakes, incredibly tense meeting at Newman Enterprises. The boardroom is a pressure cooker of aggressive negotiations, conflicting egos, and millions of dollars hanging in the balance. Victoria stands at the head of the long mahogany table, her voice sharp and commanding as she attempts to force a consensus among the squabbling executives. But as the argument reaches a fever pitch, the physical toll of her prolonged stress finally demands to be paid. The room begins to spin, the voices of the executives morphing into a distorted, echoing buzz. A sudden, terrifying tightness grips her chest, stealing the air from her lungs. The color drains completely from her face, replacing her usual commanding flush with a deathly, ashen pallor. For an agonizing, suspended moment, Victoria tries to grip the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white as she attempts to anchor herself to reality. She tries to speak, to assert her authority one last time, but no words come out. Then, in a shocking display of physical failure that shatters the myth of the invincible Newman CEO, Victoria collapses. Her body hits the floor with a sickening thud, scattering confidential documents and sending a shockwave of absolute panic through the boardroom. The executives, accustomed to her unyielding strength, are frozen in stunned disbelief before chaos erupts. Security is called, an ambulance is frantically dispatched, and the unbreakable Victoria Newman is reduced to a fragile, unconscious woman fighting for her life on the corporate carpet she once ruled. The rush to the hospital is a blur of flashing sirens, panicked paramedics, and a terrifying uncertainty. When Victoria is wheeled into the emergency room, the doctors immediately spring into action, running a battery of comprehensive tests to determine the cause of her sudden, catastrophic collapse. The diagnosis they deliver is a sobering, terrifying wake-up call. Victoria is suffering from early-stage heart failure, directly triggered by severe, chronic exhaustion and prolonged, unmanaged stress. Her heart, the literal and metaphorical engine of her relentless drive, is struggling to pump under the immense, crushing weight she has placed upon it. The doctors make it explicitly clear. Her body has simply refused to continue functioning under these toxic conditions. She is forced to confront her own mortality, forced to realize that her desperate need to be the strong one has nearly cost her her life. However, the universe is not finished delivering devastating blows to the Newman family. While Victoria is being stabilized and forced to reckon with her own severe health crisis, the doctors return with news regarding Nikki, who has also been undergoing extensive testing. For weeks, the family had been operating under the terrifying but familiar assumption that Nikki's escalating symptoms, the blinding headaches, the sudden weakness, the terrifying bouts of vision loss were the result of a severe flare-up of her multiple sclerosis. It was a demon they knew, a disease they had battled before. But the truth, revealed in the cold, sterile light of the hospital consultation room, is infinitely more horrifying. The lead neurologist, his expression grim and sympathetic, delivers the news that will shatter the Newman family's world. Nikki is not suffering from an MS exacerbation. The comprehensive scans have revealed a rare, highly aggressive, and fast-growing malignant brain tumor. The symptoms that had been masked by her pre-existing condition were actually the insidious march of a lethal cancer taking root in her brain. The sheer magnitude of this revelation is paralyzing. It is a diagnosis that carries a terrifying prognosis, shifting the narrative from chronic disease management to an immediate, desperate fight for survival. The ground completely falls out from under the family, leaving them suspended in a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. The impact of this dual tragedy on the Newman family is catastrophic. Claire Newman, who has only recently found her footing within this powerful dynasty, is utterly devastated. Having just begun to build a profound, healing relationship with her mother and her grandmother, she is now faced with the terrifying prospect of losing them both simultaneously. Claire wanders the sterile hospital corridors, her mind reeling from the shock, feeling the fragile foundation of her newly discovered family crumbling beneath her feet. The emotional devastation ripples outward, touching every member of the family, forcing them to drop their grievances, their corporate battles, and their endless power struggles in the face of absolute existential terror. The Newman fortress has been breached, not by corporate raiders or vengeful enemies, but by the fragile, unpredictable nature of human biology. When Nikki finally regains consciousness, the atmosphere in the hospital room is heavy with unspoken grief and a profound, desperate love. Victoria, despite her own severe diagnosis and the strict orders of her doctors to rest, insists on being brought to her mother's bedside. She is wheeled into the room, her face pale, and for line trailing from her arm, looking more vulnerable than she has in decades. The sight of her powerful daughter reduced to a patient breaks Nikki's heart, Just as the sight of Nikki's frail, exhausted form shatters Victoria's remaining defenses, the armor is entirely gone. There are no CEOs in this room, no unbreakable matriarchs, only a mother and a daughter facing the terrifying abyss of mortality. In a moment of breathtaking emotional intimacy, Victoria reaches out, her trembling hand finding Nikki's. The tears that Victoria has suppressed for months, the agonizing fear she has hidden behind spreadsheets and boardroom demands, finally break free. She confesses her terror, not just about Nikki's brain tumor, but about her own failing heart. She admits the crushing weight of her exhaustion, the desperate, foolish belief that she could carry the entire world on her shoulders without breaking. Nikki, drawing on a deep, maternal well of strength that supersedes her own physical agony, grips her daughter's hand tightly. She looks into Victoria's eyes, her gaze filled with a fierce, unwavering love. They share a profound, heartbreaking conversation that strips away decades of Newman stoicism. Nikki gently chastises Victoria for neglecting her own health, reminding her that true strength does not mean suffering in silence, but rather knowing when to ask for help. They weep together, mourning the time they have lost to corporate warfare and family drama, and acknowledging the terrifying, steep mountain they now have to climb. But amidst the tears and the profound sorrow, a new, unbreakable resolve is born. They make a sacred promise to one another in that quiet hospital room. They promise to stop hiding their pain, to stop fighting their battles in isolation, and to face these terrifying medical diagnoses together. They vow to lean on each other, to share the crushing burden of their fears, and to fight for their lives with a united, fierce determination that no enemy, not even cancer or heart failure, can easily extinguish. This shared vulnerability becomes their greatest weapon, proving that even in their darkest, weakest hour, the bond between this mother and daughter remains the true, enduring strength of the Newman legacy.